In court, my aunt pulled out an invoice for raising me after my mom passed food, clothes, shelter, adding up to $50,000. The judge looked it over, then asked, "And where's the $190,000 in Social Security benefits you collected?" The whole courtroom exploded. Can you imagine being sued by your own aunt for the cost of your childhood? Because that's exactly where I found myself, utterly shattered, facing the woman who promised to protect me after my mom died. You see, my name is Althea, and I'm 26 now, a registered nurse, finally living the dream my incredible mom, Amanda, planted in my heart so long ago. My dad passed when I was just 3, so it was always just mom and me. Our little 2-bedroom apartment might have been small, and money was definitely tight, but she worked tirelessly as a nurse, always making sure I never felt like we were struggling. She'd come home exhausted from long shifts at Memorial Hospital, but her eyes would light up as she told me stories about saving lives, about making a real difference in people's darkest moments. Those stories were my lullabies, shaping my own dream of one day wearing that same uniform, helping others. Weekends were sacred. Saturday mornings, our tiny kitchen would be filled with the warmth of vanilla and chocolate as we baked cookies. Sundays were for the park, feeding ducks, or getting lost in the library. "Althea," she'd say, helping me with homework at our kitchen table, "education is the one thing nobody can ever take from you." Our walls were a gallery of my childhood. Every drawing, every school certificate, displayed proudly like museum masterpieces. Good grades meant a celebratory kitchen dance and a prime spot on the fridge, held by fruit-shaped magnets. For my 10th birthday, she gave me a children's medical kit. I practically slept with that thing, diagnosing my stuffed animals and listening to her heartbeat with the plastic stethoscope. "You'll be wearing a real one someday," she'd whisper, her eyes crinkling with a love so pure, it felt like sunshine. Our life wasn't perfect, but it was ours. She picked up extra shifts during holidays just so my Christmases and birthdays felt magical. She taught me gratitude, how to appreciate what we had instead of yearning for what we didn't. Gratitude, she'd remind me, makes any life rich. I tried to embody that, even when I wished for the fancy toys or clothes some of my classmates had. Then, the summer I turned 12, everything shattered. Mom started coming home more than just tired. She was utterly exhausted. At first, she blamed extra shifts, but when she started losing weight, her cough wouldn't go away, and I'd catch her wincing in pain, secretly popping painkillers. I knew something was horribly wrong. The day she finally went to the doctor, I waited at our neighbor Mrs. Thomas's, pretending to work on a science project, but my heart was a frantic drum. When Mom returned, her face told me everything before she even spoke the words: stage 4 lung cancer. Terminal. 6 months to a year. Our happy little world was obliterated in an instant. Mom tried to keep things normal, but our roles slowly, tragically reversed. I started making dinner, doing laundry, helping her to bed when her legs wouldn't hold her. My notebook became a strict medication schedule, and I became fiercely protective of her dwindling energy. School felt secondary as I transformed into her tiny, terrified caretaker. Groceries, chores, the creeping dread of what was coming, all rested on my 12-year-old shoulders. My friends stopped calling because I couldn't go out, but I honestly didn't care. Every second with Mom became infinitely precious, painfully finite. Hospice nurses started coming daily when she couldn't get out of bed. I'd sit beside her, reading her favorite books, just holding her increasingly frail hand. "You're so strong, Althea," she'd whisper. "Promise me you'll keep going. Keep shining after I'm gone." On a quiet Tuesday morning, just 3 weeks after my 13th birthday, with my hand in hers, my mom took her last breath. The hospice nurse found me still sitting there an hour later, unable to let go. The world, my entire world, had never felt so empty, so vast, so utterly terrifying. The funeral was a blur of black suits and pitying stares. People I barely recognized hugged me, murmuring platitudes about Mom being in a better place. But what place could possibly be better than here with me? That's when Aunt Sophie, my mom's younger sister, appeared. She'd always been distant, only showing up for rare holidays with expensive, impersonal gifts. Now, she stood beside me, her hand on my shoulder, proclaiming to anyone who would listen how she'd take care of her poor, orphan niece. The social worker, my elderly grandmother, who couldn't take me in, and Sophie decided I'd move in with Sophie, her husband Jack, and their daughter, Cassidy. Sophie played the role of the caring, concerned relative perfectly for the social workers, promising me a loving home, a smooth transition. As I packed my entire childhood into boxes, I found a letter Mom had written, tucked into my favorite book. "Remember who you are, Althea," it read. "Life will throw storms your way, but you have the strength to weather them all. I'll love you always, even when you can't see me anymore." I folded that letter into my pocket, took one last, aching look at our apartment, and stepped into a new life, completely unaware of the challenges that truly awaited me. The drive to Aunt Sophie's house felt endless, nearly 3 hours that stripped away every last piece of familiarity. Each mile deepened the hollow ache in my chest as my hometown shrank in the side mirror of Sophie's luxury SUV. She said little during the ride, just an occasional comment about how different my life would be now, how much better things were in their neighborhood. And her house? It was an imposing 2-story colonial with pristine white columns and a perfectly manicured lawn. My cousin Cassidy, 15 and impossibly poised, greeted us with a rehearsed smile that never quite reached her eyes. Uncle Jack, a tall man with a perpetually mild disinterest, offered a quick welcome before disappearing into his home office. "This will be your room," Sophie announced, opening the door to a space at the very end of the hallway, far from the other bedrooms. The walls were stark white, the furniture basic, clearly second-hand. A quick glance into Cassidy's room had revealed pink walls, custom furniture. "We can add some color later, maybe," Sophie added, an obvious afterthought. That first night, Sophie made a special dinner, and everyone made polite conversation. Uncle Jack even asked about my interests, and Sophie actually shared a few childhood memories of my mom. For a fleeting moment, I dared to hope. Maybe, just maybe, this wouldn't be so bad. But the shift came, subtly at first, then rapidly. By the end of my first week, Sophie handed me a list of house rules that magically didn't apply to Cassidy. Strict curfew, limited bathroom time, designated study hours, and a growing list of chores. "In this house, everyone contributes," she'd explained, pressing a toilet brush into my hand. Meanwhile, Cassidy was usually lounging by their backyard pool, her own chores mysteriously non-existent. My few belongings, which had filled our apartment, now looked meager, lost in that spare room. Sophie had gone through my boxes before I even had a chance to unpack, setting aside clothes she deemed too worn or inappropriate. When I asked about them, she simply said, "We have standards in this neighborhood, Althea. You represent our family now." School was another jarring adjustment. My academic records transferred, but that was it. No friends, no history, no teachers who knew how capable I was. They placed me in standard classes, despite my advanced programs at my old school. When I brought it up to Sophie, she just brushed it off. "Let's not get ahead of ourselves. You've been through a trauma. Best to take it easy." The casual dismissal stung. The first undeniable sign of my place in their household came when school supplies were purchased. Cassidy got a brand new laptop, a designer backpack, top-of-the-line everything. Me? I got a plastic binder, basic notebooks, and dollar store pens. "We have to be mindful of expenses," Sophie said, noticing my expression. "Your mother didn't leave much for your care." That night, through the thin walls, I heard Sophie and Uncle Jack arguing. "The Social Security checks barely cover the extra expenses." Sophie's voice was sharp. "Do you know how much teenagers eat? How much their activities cost?" "She's family, Sophie," Jack replied, his voice tired, resigned. "Family that's costing us," Sophie spat back. Amanda always was irresponsible, not planning better for her daughter. I buried my face in my pillow, tears soaking through as I clutched Mom's letter. The money comments became a constant feature of my life with Sophie. If I outgrew clothes, needed new school supplies, or even if I ate what she deemed too much at dinner, I was reminded, constantly, of the financial burden I represented. "Do you know how much braces cost?" she'd mutter when the dentist recommended them. We'd leave without scheduling the orthodontic work. "College applications are $70 each," she complained when I brought home information about universities with nursing programs. "Maybe community college would be more appropriate for your situation." The contrast between how Cassidy was treated and how I was only grew. Cassidy got a car for her 16th birthday. I was told to get a job to save for my own transportation. Cassidy's room was redecorated seasonally. My faded blue bedspread remained the same since the day I arrived. Cassidy had dance classes, lacrosse practice, SAT prep. I was told such extras weren't in the budget for me. Uncle Jack saw it all, but his acceptance was passive. Sometimes he'd slip me $20 or offer to drive me somewhere Sophie had refused, but he never directly challenged her. "Your aunt is under a lot of pressure," he'd say, as if that explained away the emotional neglect. Through it all, The memory of my mother's warmth became both my comfort and my torture. I'd close my eyes at night, desperately trying to conjure the sound of her laugh, the feeling of her hand brushing hair from my face. Those memories sustained me through Sophie's coldness, through Cassidy's casual cruelty, through the growing, painful awareness that I was simply not wanted in this house. So, I started spending more time at the school library, volunteering for any activity that kept me away from Sophie's critical gaze. I joined study groups, helped teachers after class, and discovered that academic success could be a powerful form of escape. If I couldn't have love, I could at least have achievement. Then, one evening, while cleaning the kitchen, a mandatory chore, I accidentally knocked over Sophie's purse. As I gathered the spilled contents, I saw it, a letter from the Social Security Administration, addressed to Sophie, my guardian. It referenced monthly survivor benefits being deposited for my care. The amount was substantial, far more than Sophie had ever implied she received. That night, I carefully replaced Mom's photo on my nightstand, the one Sophie had suggested I put away to help with the grieving process. I looked into my mother's smiling eyes and made a silent promise. I would endure. I would succeed. And someday, I would escape. High school brought new challenges, yes, but also unexpected opportunities. Despite Sophie's utter dismissal of my academic potential, I fought tooth and nail to be placed in honors classes and quickly proved I belonged there. My science teachers, especially, noticed my aptitude. By sophomore year, I joined the Health Sciences Club, the crucial first step toward my dream of following in my mother's footsteps. Another club meeting? Sophie would ask, her voice dripping with thinly veiled irritation. I suppose you'll need money for that, too. I never asked for money anymore. Instead, I'd secured a part-time job at Sweet Blossom's Bakery, 3 afternoons a week and all day Saturday. Mrs. Garcia, the owner, became a bright, warm spot in my increasingly gray life, often slipping me extra pastries at closing and adjusting my schedule during exam periods. My first paycheck felt like absolute freedom in my hands. Until Sophie cornered me in the kitchen. Now that you're earning an income, you'll need to contribute to household expenses, she announced, her hand extended. $300 monthly seems fair for room and board. It was nearly half my earnings, but I handed it over without argument. Fighting Sophie only ever made things worse. I'd learned that through painful experience. Later that night, I overheard Sophie telling Uncle Jack how she was teaching Althea financial responsibility by collecting rent. And Cassidy? Now a senior and the self-appointed queen of the school, she made sure everyone knew I was her charity case cousin. She spread twisted stories about my mother's death, embellishing details for maximum pity or, depending on her audience, outright mockery. If boys showed interest in me, she'd warn them about my unstable family background and probable emotional issues. Then, one rainy Tuesday during junior year, I stayed late to make up a chemistry lab. Walking to the bus stop, I realized I'd missed the last one. Just as I resigned myself to a 3-mile walk in the pouring rain, a car pulled alongside me. It was Mrs. Jackson, my AP biology teacher, rolling down her window. "Althea, get in before you drown," she called. During the drive home, Mrs. Jackson asked questions, real questions, about my interest in medicine, my study habits, my plans after high school. When she pulled up to Sophie's house, she hesitated before saying, "You remind me of myself at your age. Determined, focused, despite obstacles." Something in her tone made me look up sharply. Mrs. Jackson smiled gently. "My door is always open if you need to talk about anything." 2 weeks later, after Sophie had, yet again, confiscated half my paycheck for excessive utility use, I found myself in Mrs. Jackson's classroom during lunch. The words poured out of me, the financial manipulation, the emotional neglect, that Social Security letter I'd found. Mrs. Jackson listened without interruption, her expression growing increasingly troubled. "Have you considered that your aunt may be misusing funds meant for your care?" she finally asked. The thought had haunted me for years, but hearing it from an adult, a trusted teacher, gave it a terrifying legitimacy. "What can I do?" I asked, my voice small. "I'm a minor. She's my guardian." Mrs. Jackson's reply changed everything. "Start documenting. Keep records. And let's look into scholarship options that could get you out of there after graduation." With Mrs. Jackson's guidance, I plunged headfirst into researching nursing scholarships obsessively. I joined every club that might strengthen my applications, volunteered at the local hospital on Sundays, and maintained perfect grades despite working nearly 20 hours a week. One evening, while searching for a stapler in Uncle Jack's office, Sophie always insisted I keep things organized. I discovered a folder with my name on it. Inside were years of Social Security statements. Monthly deposits over $1,000, specifically for my care. Nearly $60,000 had been paid to Sophie since Mom died. $60,000. Yet I wore secondhand clothes, had basic school supplies, and was made to feel guilty for every morsel of food I ate. My hands trembled as I photographed the documents, then carefully replaced everything exactly as I'd found it. That night, I emailed those photos to Mrs. Jackson and to myself, using my school email address, creating a digital breadcrumb trail, evidence I hoped I'd never actually need to use. Senior year arrived, bringing with it university applications and a quiet, burning determination to escape Sophie's house forever. Mrs. Jackson was my lifeline, helping me apply for every scholarship imaginable, editing my essays during lunch periods and after school. When acceptance letters started arriving, Sophie intercepted them, of course, presenting each with comments about the burden of student loans and my unrealistic expectations. But the breakthrough came in April. A full-ride nursing scholarship to State University, including housing, meals, and a stipend for books. When that thick envelope arrived, I raced to the mailbox before Sophie could get to it. I tore it open right there, devouring its contents. It was real. That night, I called Mrs. Jackson, my voice barely containing the sheer, unadulterated excitement. I got it. I'm free. My high school graduation ceremony should have been a pure celebration. Instead, Sophie spent the entire day complaining about the cost of my cap and gown, the waste of ordering announcements, and the impracticality of my chosen nursing program. Cassidy, home from her first year at an expensive private college, fully funded by her parents, naturally rolled her eyes throughout Sophie's monologue. During the ceremony, I scanned the audience, disappointed but not surprised to find the section where Sophie and Jack should have been sitting empty. As I walked across the stage to accept my diploma, though, I heard a distinct, booming cheer from the back. There, standing proudly, were Mrs. Jackson and Mrs. Garcia from the bakery, both clapping wildly. After the ceremony, Mrs. Jackson handed me a small gift bag. Inside was a professional stethoscope, just like my mother had used. The card read simply, "Your mother would be so proud of the woman you've become." I know I am. For the first time since my mother died, I felt truly seen, valued, and championed. Walking back to Sophie's house that day, my diploma in my hand and that stethoscope in my bag, I knew it. I was just weeks away from a brand new beginning. The day I moved into my college dormitory felt like exhaling after holding my breath for years. It was like breathing fresh air after being underwater. State University was only 40 minutes from Sophie's house, but it might as well have been another planet. My residence hall room was small, with institutional furniture and cinder block walls, but it represented something priceless: independence. My roommate, Jasmine, arrived with her parents, who helped her unpack boxes and hang fairy lights around her side of the room. They even offered to help with my things, too. But my entire life fit into 2 suitcases and a backpack. Sophie had merely dropped me off at the campus entrance, not even bothering to park. "Text when you're settled," she'd said, already putting the car in drive. "And remember, your scholarship doesn't cover holiday breaks. We'll need to discuss compensation if you plan to stay with us during those times." Jasmine and I became fast friends, despite our vastly different backgrounds. She came from a loving family who called her daily, sent care packages, and genuinely wanted to know about her classes. When she realized I never received such calls or packages, she began sharing hers without a word. "My mom always sends too much anyway," she'd say, dividing cookies or toiletries between us. University life demanded intense focus. The nursing program was rigorous: early morning clinicals, late-night study sessions, endless practical exams. But I thrived under the pressure, remembering my mother's dedication to her patients. To cover expenses not included in my scholarship, I worked at the campus coffee shop and took weekend shifts at a nearby assisted living facility. Between classes, work, and studying, I barely had time to think about Sophie, which was exactly how I wanted it. The less contact, the better. Still, holiday breaks loomed on the calendar like dark, gathering clouds. Before Thanksgiving break my freshman year, Sophie called, already outlining her expectations for my visit. "Since you're not contributing financially anymore, we'll need compensation for your stay. $300 for the week seems fair. Food isn't free, Althea." I swallowed hard, my mind instantly calculating how many extra shifts I'd need to afford going home for the holiday. Jasmine, overhearing my end of the conversation, waited until I hung up before saying, "Come home with me instead. My parents would love to have you." That Thanksgiving became the first of many holidays spent with Jasmine's family. The Parkers welcomed me without question, including me in family photos and traditions as though I'd always been there. Mrs. Parker, learning about my nursing studies, shared stories from her own career as a physical therapist. Mr. Parker taught me to make his famous cranberry sauce, standing beside me in the kitchen with patient, gentle instructions. When Sophie called on Christmas to ask when I'd be arriving with my room and board payment, I calmly informed her I had made other arrangements. Her surprised pause was deafening, followed by concern, not for my well-being, but for the lost income. It was a cold, hard truth. Spring semester brought new challenges and, surprisingly, even more opportunities. I was accepted into an accelerated program that would let me finish my degree in 3 years instead of 4. The workload ratcheted up dramatically, but so did my determination. It was during a campus career fair that I met David. He was a medical student, volunteering at the healthcare booth, tall, with kind eyes and a quiet confidence that immediately drew me in. He struck up a conversation about my interest in pediatric nursing, and before long, we were meeting for coffee between classes, talking for hours about healthcare, ethics, patient advocacy, and our own personal journeys into medicine. "My dad's a surgeon," David explained during one of our coffee dates. "He expected me to follow exactly in his footsteps, but I'm interested in family practice in underserved communities. We've been at odds about it for years." His understanding of family pressure created an instant, deep bond between us. When I finally shared the full, painful story of Sophie's treatment, he listened without judgment, then asked the question that had been hovering in my own mind for years. "Have you considered that what she did might be illegal?" Social Security benefits for surviving children are meant to provide for the child, not supplement the guardian's income. During spring break of my sophomore year, instead of accepting another invitation from Jasmine's family, I stayed on campus to research. The nearly empty library became my second home as I dug through legal websites and forums for similar situations. What I discovered left me utterly stunned. Guardians misappropriating survivor benefits could face serious legal consequences, including fraud charges. I immediately made an appointment with the university's legal aid office, bringing copies of those Social Security statements I'd photographed from Uncle Jack's office. The student attorney who reviewed my case looked increasingly serious as I explained the situation. "This isn't just unethical," he said finally. "It's potentially criminal. Your aunt had a fiduciary responsibility to use those funds for your direct benefit. What are my options?" I asked, my heart pounding a frantic rhythm against my ribs. "You could file a complaint, possibly pursue recovery of funds, but that would mean legal action against your aunt." He studied my face. "It's a big step. Think about it carefully." I left the office with resources and information, but no clear decision. That night, I called Mrs. Jackson, who had remained a trusted mentor throughout my college years. "You don't have to decide anything right now," she advised. "Focus on your education. Document everything. The statute of limitations gives you time." Junior year was intense. Clinical rotations cemented my passion for nursing, especially working with children. Every day, helping actual patients, I was reminded why I'd chosen this path, feeling my mother's spirit guiding my hands. My professors often praised my blend of technical skill and compassion, attributes I knew I'd inherited from watching my mom. David and I grew incredibly close, supporting each other through grueling exams and endless late-night study sessions. When he invited me to meet his parents over summer break, I accepted with only slight trepidation. But unlike Sophie, Dr. and Mrs. Hoffman welcomed me with genuine warmth, asking thoughtful questions about my studies and goals. "Althea has the highest GPA in the nursing program," David announced proudly over dinner. Dr. Hoffman raised his glass, toasting excellence and compassion in healthcare. "The world needs more providers like you too." The contrast between David's loving family and my own experiences with Sophie couldn't have been starker. That night, lying in the comfortable guest room of the Hoffmans' home, I finally allowed myself to acknowledge the full, crushing extent of Sophie's betrayal. It wasn't just about the money anymore. It was about denying me the fundamental love and support a child deserves after losing their only parent. As graduation approached, job offers started pouring in, thanks to my impeccable academic record and glowing recommendations from clinical supervisors. I accepted a dream position at Children's Memorial Hospital in the Pediatric Intensive Care Unit with a starting salary that would finally provide true financial stability. 2 weeks before graduation, David proposed during a picnic at the campus lake, right where we'd had our first real date. The vintage sapphire ring had belonged to his grandmother, he explained, given to him with her blessing after she'd met me. "You don't have to answer right away," he said, reading my shocked expression. "I know we're both starting our careers, and timing is complicated." I kissed him, tears streaming down my face. Yes, absolutely yes. Life was finally taking shape, molded by my own design, free from Sophie's restrictions or limitations. As I prepared for graduation, for my new job, for a future with David, I truly believed the chapter with Sophie was closed. I was so wrong. My graduation day dawned bright and clear, a perfect May morning that felt symbolic of my new beginning. Jasmine and I helped each other into our caps and gowns, taking dozens of photos in our dorm room one last time. The Parkers arrived early, bearing flowers and hugs. David and his parents came with a gift bag containing a beautiful new lab coat with Althea Marshall RN embroidered on the pocket. We gathered outside the auditorium, a joyous throng, and that's when I spotted an unexpected trio approaching: Sophie, Uncle Jack, and Cassidy, all dressed in what I recognized as their public appearance outfits. Sophie's smile was wide, but it never quite reached her eyes. "We wouldn't miss our Althea's big day," she announced, loudly enough for nearby families to hear, placing possessive emphasis on our. She air-kissed my cheeks while whispering, "We need to talk after the ceremony." Throughout the graduation, I could feel Sophie's gaze on me. When my name was called, I heard her voice rise above the others. "That's my niece. I raised her after her mother died." The ceremony concluded with mortarboards flying into the air and tears of joy all around. As graduates dispersed to find their families, Sophie intercepted me before I could reach the Parkers and Hoffmans. "We brought you a graduation gift," she said, pressing a thick envelope into my hands. "Open it now." Inside was not a card, but what appeared to be a meticulously itemized invoice, printed on Sophie's personal stationery. The heading screamed, "Expenses incurred in raising Althea Marshall, 2012 to 2017. The list was extensive, detailed: room and board, 60 months at $500 per month, $30,000. Clothing and personal items, $4,850. School supplies and activities, $3,275. Medical and dental expenses, $5,200. Transportation and miscellaneous, $6,675. The total, circled in angry red pen at the bottom, was $50,000. What is this?" I asked, my voice barely audible over the celebratory noise around us. "A reality check," Sophie replied, her smile never wavering, "for the benefit of onlookers. Now that you're officially an adult with a career, it's time to repay what you owe. We made many sacrifices to provide for you after your mother's irresponsibility left you with nothing." Uncle Jack looked profoundly uncomfortable, but remained silent. Cassidy smirked slightly. "I don't owe you anything," I said, trying to keep my voice steady. Despite the tremor in my hands. "The government sent you money every month specifically for my care." Sophie's smile tightened. "Barely enough to cover basics. This bill reflects additional expenses. We expect monthly payments, beginning with your first nursing paycheck." Before I could respond, David appeared at my side, sensing the sudden tension. "Everything okay here?" I introduced him briefly, watching Sophie's expression shift as she noted his confident posture and the expensive watch that marked him as coming from money. "Just a family matter," Sophie said smoothly. "Althea understands her obligations." That evening, surrounded by the Parkers, Hoffmans, and friends from the nursing program at a celebratory dinner, I tried desperately to push Sophie's outrageous invoice from my mind. David, sensing my distraction, squeezed my hand under the table. "Whatever it is, we'll figure it out together," he whispered. Just 3 days later, an official-looking letter arrived at my new apartment. It was from a law firm, representing Sophie Marshall, demanding payment of $50,000 for care and support during my minor years. It threatened legal action if a payment plan wasn't established within 30 days. Pure, unadulterated panic seized me. I immediately called David, who connected me with his father. Dr. Hoffman listened carefully, then recommended a lawyer friend who specialized in family law. "Don't respond to anything yet," he advised. "Let's get professional guidance first." Marcus Wright's law office was modest but neat, diplomas from prestigious schools lining the walls. After reviewing Sophie's outrageous invoice and that chilling legal letter, he leaned back in his chair, a puzzled expression on his face. "This is highly unusual," he admitted. "Guardians typically don't sue former wards for basic care expenses, especially when they've received government benefits for that purpose." He studied me thoughtfully. "There's something more going on here. Tell me everything about your time with your aunt." For the next 2 hours, the words poured out. My entire life with Sophie, the constant reminders of what a cost I was, the stark difference in treatment compared to Cassidy, the discovery of those Social Security statements, and Sophie's escalating demands once I started working. Marcus took extensive notes, occasionally asking clarifying questions. When I finally finished, he closed his notebook decisively. "I'll take your case," he said. "And I don't think you'll owe your aunt a dime when we're done." The next few weeks were a flurry of legal preparation. Marcus filed a counterclaim, denying Sophie's right to reimbursement. He also submitted requests for financial records related to my mother's estate and any benefits received on my behalf. During this process, we uncovered truly shocking information. My mother had maintained a modest life insurance policy, naming me as beneficiary. Those funds should have been placed in trust for my benefit. Additionally, there was a small inheritance from my maternal grandparents that I'd never even been informed about. Where did this money go? I asked Marcus during a meeting. "That's exactly what we need to find out," he replied, typing another note. "Your aunt had legal obligations as your guardian to manage these assets in your best interest." 2 months after Sophie's initial demand, we received notice of a court date. The lawsuit was moving forward, with Sophie seeking the full $50,000 plus legal fees. Marcus, surprisingly, seemed almost pleased by this development. "Now we'll have discovery," he explained. The legal power to demand financial records she might otherwise withhold. Through formal discovery requests, Marcus obtained bank statements, tax returns, and benefit records from Sophie's accounts during my time in her home. What they revealed was utterly horrifying. Not only had Sophie received monthly Social Security survivor benefits of over $1,000, but she had also collected the life insurance payout and the inheritance money. The total amount that should have been used for my care or held in trust. Nearly $190,000. "She spent all of it," Marcus said grimly, reviewing the financial analysis. "And now she's suing you for more. How is that possible?" I asked, staring at the figures, my voice a strained whisper. "How could she legally take all that money?" "She couldn't. That's the point." Marcus began organizing documents into a trial folder. "Your aunt didn't just fail to provide adequately for you using funds specifically designated for that purpose. She potentially committed fraud." As our court date approached, I struggled to balance preparing for the case with starting my new job at Children's Memorial. David provided unwavering support, accompanying me to meetings with Marcus and helping research similar cases. The night before the trial, sleep was impossible. Memories of my mother flooded back, her gentle hands checking my temperature when I was sick, her proud smile at school events, her whispered encouragements when tasks seemed too difficult. What would she think of all this? In the darkness of my bedroom, I whispered to her memory, "I'm trying to be strong, Mom. I hope you'd be proud of who I've become, despite everything." The next morning, I dressed carefully in a conservative navy dress and low heels, my mother's small pearl earrings my only jewelry. David drove me to the courthouse, where Marcus waited on the steps with a confident smile. "Ready?" he asked. Taking a deep, shaky breath, I nodded. "Ready." The county courthouse was an imposing brick building with marble columns and high ceilings that amplified every footstep. David and Jasmine flanked me as we walked through security, their presence a silent, powerful strength. Marcus led us to a polished wooden bench outside courtroom C, where we waited for our case to be called. Across the corridor, Sophie, Uncle Jack, and Cassidy sat with their attorney, a sleek man in an expensive suit who kept checking his gold watch. Sophie had dressed for the occasion in a conservative cream suit that screamed respectable citizen. When our eyes briefly met, she gave me a small, confident smile that sent chills down my spine. "All these years," I whispered to David. She made me feel like I was taking food from her table, wearing clothes she could barely afford to provide. "And all that time." "Don't focus on her," Marcus advised, overhearing. "Today is about facts, not feelings. Let the evidence speak." At 9:30, the bailiff called our case, Marshall versus Marshall. Judge Harriet Woodson presiding. The courtroom was smaller than I'd imagined, with only a few spectators scattered among the benches. Judge Woodson, an African-American woman in her 60s with silver-streaked hair and penetrating eyes, nodded briskly as we took our places. "I've reviewed the filings in this case," she began. "Mrs. Sophie Marshall is suing her niece, Althea Marshall, for reimbursement of child-rearing expenses in the amount of $50,000 plus legal fees. Miss Althea Marshall has filed a counterclaim. Let's proceed with opening statements." Sophie's attorney, Mr. Daniels, approached the bench first. His voice was smooth as butter, as he painted Sophie as a selfless relative who stepped in after tragedy, sacrificing financially to provide a stable home for her orphan niece. "Your Honor," he began, "my client opened her home and her heart when her sister tragically passed away, leaving a 13-year-old daughter with no resources and no provisions for her care. For 5 years, the Marshalls provided food, shelter, clothing, educational support, and emotional stability during a difficult time." He gestured dramatically toward Sophie, who had adopted an expression of saintly patience. "They did this without complaint, Your Honor, despite the significant financial burden it placed on their household. Now that Miss Althea Marshall has secured lucrative employment as a registered nurse, my client simply asks for reasonable compensation for these extraordinary expenses." Marcus took notes throughout, his expression neutral. When his turn came, he approached the bench with calm confidence. "Your Honor, this case isn't about compensation for childcare expenses. It's about accountability for funds that were specifically designated for Althea Marshall's care following her mother's death. Funds that were substantial and more than adequate to provide for her needs without additional contribution from the defendant." Judge Woodson leaned forward slightly. "You're referring to survivor benefits?" "Yes, Your Honor, and more. We have documentation showing Mrs. Sophie Marshall received Social Security survivor benefits, life insurance proceeds, and inheritance funds totaling nearly $190,000 that should have been used exclusively for Althea's care or held in trust for her future." A small murmur ran through the courtroom. Sophie's composed facade cracked slightly as she whispered urgently to her attorney. "That's a serious allegation, Counselor," Judge Woodson noted. "I'll need to see that documentation." "Let's proceed with testimony." Sophie took the stand first, describing how she'd rescued me from potential foster care after my mother's death. She detailed the sacrifices her family made, Cassidy sharing her home with a cousin she barely knew, family vacations curtailed due to the expense of another child, the emotional labor of helping a grieving teenager adjust. Mr. Daniels dramatically presented Sophie's itemized invoice, walking through each category of expense. Sophie nodded earnestly as he highlighted particularly costly items: braces I'd needed but never received, sports equipment for activities I'd never participated in, special tutoring I'd never been offered. "And did the Social Security benefits you received cover these expenses?" Mr. Daniels asked. Sophie shook her head solemnly. "Not even close. The monthly benefit barely covered her food. Everything else came from our pocket." When Marcus rose for cross-examination, his approach was methodical. He established Sophie as my legal guardian, responsible for managing any assets or benefits for my welfare. Then he began introducing exhibits, bank statements showing regular deposits from Social Security, documents regarding my mother's life insurance policy, and records of my grandparents' inheritance. "Mrs. Marshall, can you explain why you're claiming financial hardship when records show you received over $3,000 monthly designated specifically for Althea's care?" Sophie shifted uncomfortably. "That's not accurate. The Social Security was much less." Marcus presented another document. "This statement from the Social Security Administration confirms monthly payments of $1,235 paid to you as Althea's guardian. Additionally, you received a lump sum life insurance payment of $65,000 and inheritance funds of $15,000, both legally required to be used for Althea's benefit. Where did these funds go?" Sophie's composure crumbled further. "There were many expenses. Household costs increased substantially. We had to move to a larger home to accommodate her." "Mrs. Marshall," Marcus continued, his voice calm but firm, "during the 5 years Althea lived with you, these funds totaled approximately $190,000. Yet you provided her with second-hand clothes, denied her orthodontic care, made her work to pay for her own basic needs, and now claim she owes you an additional $50,000. Can you explain this discrepancy?" Sophie's attorney objected repeatedly, but Judge Woodson allowed most of Marcus's questions, her expression growing increasingly concerned as Sophie's answers became more evasive. When it was my turn to testify, I focused on facts rather than emotions. I described the glaring differences in treatment compared to Cassidy, being required to pay rent from my part-time job earnings, the systematic lack of support for educational expenses, and the sickening discovery of those benefit statements in Uncle Jack's office. Mr. Daniels' cross-examination attempted to paint me as ungrateful and entitled. Wasn't it generous of the Marshalls to take you in rather than sending you to foster care? Don't you think you owe them something for the roof over your head for 5 years? Before I could answer, Judge Woodson interrupted. Counsel, she stated, her voice sharp, the question of whether a minor child owes a legal guardian for basic necessities is inappropriate. The guardian voluntarily accepted legal responsibility along with the benefits provided for the child's care. The judge called a brief recess after testimony concluded. When court resumed, she had reviewed all the financial documentation provided by both sides. I've seen enough, Judge Woodson announced, removing her reading glasses. Mrs. Marshall, would you please approach the bench? Sophie rose shakily, her earlier confidence completely evaporated. Mrs. Marshall, Judge Woodson began, as Althea's legal guardian, you had a fiduciary duty to use all funds designated for her care, either to provide for her immediate needs or to preserve them for her future. The evidence presented today suggests you did neither. The judge shuffled through the documents before continuing, her voice stern. You received approximately $190,000 meant for Althea's benefit. Based on your own testimony and the evidence presented, it appears these funds were commingled with your personal accounts and used primarily for your family's expenses, not Althea's. Sophie attempted to interrupt, but Judge Woodson held up her hand. I'm not finished. Not only did you apparently misappropriate these funds, but you've now had the audacity to sue your niece for additional money, claiming expenses that should have been more than covered by the benefits you received. She turned to address the entire courtroom, her voice ringing with authority. I am dismissing Mrs. Marshall's claim with prejudice. Furthermore, I am referring this case to the District Attorney's Office for investigation into potential misuse of Social Security benefits and breach of fiduciary duty. The courtroom erupted in murmurs. David squeezed my hand so tightly it almost hurt. Jasmine wiped tears from her eyes. Judge Woodson continued, Miss Althea Marshall. You have the right to pursue civil recovery of misappropriated funds if you wish. My clerk will provide information on that process should you decide to proceed. With a final bang of her gavel, it was over. Sophie stood frozen by the bench, her face ashen. Uncle Jack stared at the floor while Cassidy frantically texted on her phone. As we exited the courtroom, Marcus smiled broadly. Congratulations. That couldn't have gone better. What happens now? I asked, still processing the judge's powerful words. That's up to you, Marcus replied. You could pursue recovery of the funds, but that would mean another legal battle. Or you can consider this closed and move forward with your life. David put his arm around my shoulders. Whatever you decide, you're not alone. Looking back at Sophie, being consoled by her attorney, I felt no triumph, no surge of vindictive satisfaction. Only a profound sadness for what might have been, the family support I'd been denied, the love that should have followed my mother's death. But I also felt something else, something liberating, freedom. Freedom from the crushing guilt and obligation Sophie had burdened me with for years. Outside the courthouse, standing in the bright sunlight, I made my decision. I don't want their money, I said, my voice clear. I just want to close this chapter and start my own life. Marcus nodded understandingly. Sometimes the victory that matters most isn't financial. It's the truth being recognized. As we walked down the courthouse steps, I noticed a familiar figure waiting near the bottom. Mrs. Jackson, my high school biology teacher and mentor. Her presence was the final, profound validation I needed, a reminder that true family isn't always defined by blood. The days following the trial brought a strange, complex mixture of emotions, relief, vindication, a lingering sadness, and an overwhelming new sense of freedom. David drove me home in thoughtful silence, occasionally squeezing my hand when words felt inadequate. Jasmine and the Parkers had organized a small gathering at my apartment, their quiet way of showing support without explicitly celebrating what had, at its core, been a family tragedy. As friends shared food and quiet conversation, I slipped onto my small balcony for a moment alone. The setting sun cast long shadows across the city, a poignant visual reminder that one chapter was emphatically ending, while another, brighter one, was just beginning. My phone buzzed. A text from Sophie. This isn't over. Family doesn't treat family this way. I stared at the message, the bitter irony of her words almost comical. Family doesn't treat family the way she had treated me, as a financial transaction, a burden, an obligation, rather than a person to love. For the very first time, I deleted her message without a single pang of guilt or obligation to respond. David joined me on the balcony, wrapping his jacket around my shoulders against the evening chill. "You okay?" he asked softly. "I think I will be," I answered, my voice a little stronger than I expected. "Honestly, it's just a lot to process." The very next morning, I began my first official shift at Children's Memorial Hospital. Walking through those doors, wearing my scrubs and my mother's pearl earrings, felt like fulfilling a promise made long, long ago. The pediatric intensive care unit was challenging, of course, but so incredibly rewarding. Each tiny patient reminded me daily why I'd fought so hard to reach this point. My supervisor, Nurse Karen, took me under her wing, patiently guiding me through protocols and introducing me to the unique emotional demands of pediatric nursing. "You have a natural way with the children," she observed during my first week. "Some nurses take years to develop that kind of connection." I didn't tell her about my own childhood losses. Not yet. Those wounds were still healing, the scars still tender to touch. Instead, I channeled my experiences into deep empathy for my patients and their families, recognizing the raw fear in parents' eyes and the fierce courage in children facing pain beyond their understanding. 2 weeks after the trial, Uncle Jack called. His voice sounded tired, utterly defeated. "Althea, I know I have no right to ask anything of you, but I wanted you to know. I had no idea about the extent of what Sophie was doing. The Social Security, yes, but not the life insurance or inheritance. But you still let her treat me like a burden," I replied, surprising myself with the steadiness of my voice. "You watched it happen every day for 5 years and did nothing." His heavy sigh carried through the phone. "You're right. My passivity makes me complicit. I should have protected you and I failed. I'm sorry, Althea. Though I know that's inadequate." After a long, awkward pause, he added, "Sophie and I are separating." The trial was a wake-up call about who she really is and who I've allowed myself to become by standing by. "I just wanted you to know." I felt no satisfaction in their marriage's collapse, only a complicated sadness for the family that might have been mine, but never truly was. "I hope you find peace, Uncle Jack," I said. "I really do." That conversation marked the last direct contact I had with Sophie's household. Through mutual connections, I eventually learned the district attorney had decided not to pursue criminal charges, but had required Sophie to complete financial management courses and community service. Cassidy occasionally sent hostile messages on social media, which I eventually solved by simply blocking her accounts. As summer turned to fall, I established routines in my new life, challenging but fulfilling shifts at the hospital, quiet evenings with David planning our future, weekend brunches with Jasmine and friends from nursing school. My small apartment slowly transformed from a sterile space into a true home, filled with plants, photographs, and small treasures that represented my emerging identity. One crisp September afternoon, I received an unexpected email from the hospital's Human Resources Department. A trust fund had been established in my mother's name to provide scholarships for nursing students from single-parent households. The anonymous donor had requested I serve on the committee. The attached documentation revealed the trust had been funded with exactly $50,000, the exact amount Sophie had demanded from me. A separate note from the hospital's legal department confirmed the donation had come from Uncle Jack. That evening, I called Mrs. Jackson to share the news. After all these years, she remained my trusted advisor in life's complicated moments. "It sounds like his way of making amends," she observed, "not erasing the past, but trying to create something positive from it." "Should I accept the committee position?" I asked. "Part of me wants nothing to do with anything connected to that family." "Consider this," she replied thoughtfully. "The committee position isn't about them. It's about honoring your mother and helping students who share your experience. Don't let Sophie take that opportunity from you, too." Her wisdom, as always, cut through my confusion. The following day, I accepted the position, my first small step toward transforming pain into purpose. As my first year of professional nursing progressed, I found myself increasingly drawn to working with children from difficult home situations. Their resilience reminded me so much of my own journey. Their small victories became my personal triumphs, and I celebrated alongside them. The hospital's social worker noticed my deep connection with these patients and invited me to join a support program for children in foster care or kinship guardianship. Sometimes the best healing comes from helping others through similar struggles, she explained. David supported my growing involvement in these programs, often accompanying me to events for the children. His medical residency was demanding, but we always carved out time for our relationship, planning a small, intimate wedding for the following spring. The Parkers and Hoffmans had essentially adopted me into their families, providing the loving support network I'd missed for so many years. 6 months after the trial, on my mother's birthday, I finally felt ready to visit her grave. David offered to come with me, but this was a journey I needed to make alone. The cemetery was peaceful, autumn leaves creating a golden canopy over the modest headstone. I placed fresh flowers beside her name, then sat on the grass and told her everything about my nursing career, the truth about Sophie, finding love with David, and the scholarship fund now bearing her name. I survived, Mom, I whispered, tears flowing freely. Not just survived, but found my way to thrive. I think you'd be proud of that. On the drive home, I made a detour to visit Mrs. Thomas, our former neighbor who had watched me on the day of my mother's diagnosis. Now in her 80s, she welcomed me with surprised delight, serving tea in chipped cups as we caught up on the years between. Her walls still displayed photographs of her own children and grandchildren. And there, on a crowded shelf, stood a small framed picture of my mother and me at a long-ago birthday party. She was so proud of you, Mrs. Thomas recalled, following my gaze to the photograph. Always said you had her compassion, but twice her determination. Looks like she was right. These small reconnections with my past helped stitch together the fragmented narrative of my life. Each conversation, each memory shared by those who had known my mother, added another precious thread to the tapestry of my identity, separate from Sophie's distortions and manipulations. As my healing progressed, I began seeing a therapist specializing in family trauma. Dr. Lin helped me understand that Sophie's treatment hadn't been my fault, that children aren't responsible for earning their guardians' love or care. Gradually, the nightmares decreased, the anxiety attacks became less frequent, and the reflexive guilt over costing too much began to fade. The hardest part of healing, Dr. Lin observed during one session, is accepting that some people who should have loved us were simply incapable of doing so. Their limitation doesn't diminish your worthiness. Those words became a mantra during difficult moments, a constant reminder that Sophie's coldness reflected her character, not my value. 1 year after the trial, I received an unexpected package. Inside was my mother's nursing pin from her graduation, along with several photographs I thought lost forever. A brief note from Uncle Jack explained he'd found them in storage while moving to his new apartment. That small brass pin became a talisman I carried in my pocket during difficult shifts, a tangible connection to the woman whose love had shaped me far more profoundly than Sophie's neglect ever could. Life continues to unfold in ways both expected and surprising. David and I married in a simple, heartfelt ceremony, surrounded by our chosen family. We're saving for a house where we can build the warm, supportive home environment neither of our childhoods fully provided. My career advances steadily, with a recent promotion to charge nurse in the pediatric unit. And the scholarship fund in my mother's name has already helped 3 students pursue nursing degrees. Each recipient reminds me of myself a few years ago, carrying invisible burdens while working toward a future built on service to others. Looking back at the journey from that terrified 13-year-old girl clutching her mother's letter to the woman I am today, I recognize the profound truth that has emerged from all the pain. Family isn't defined by blood or legal documents. It's created through love, respect, and mutual support, qualities Sophie never understood, but that I found in abundance with the people who've chosen to walk alongside me. The judge's words in that courtroom did more than dismiss Sophie's lawsuit. They validated my worth and my right to be treated with dignity. But the real victory wasn't legal. It was learning that despite everything, I remained capable of trust, love, and connection. Sophie took my childhood, yes, but she couldn't take my future or my capacity for joy. So, if you're watching this, if you're struggling with family who treats you as a burden rather than a blessing, please know this. Your worth is not determined by their limitations. True family sees your value without ever calculating your cost. Sometimes, we have to create that family for ourselves, building connections based on mutual respect and unwavering support, not obligation. It's a hard journey, but the freedom on the other side? It's absolutely worth fighting for.